Dane's ship soared away from the collapsing abyss, leaving the storm-racked sea behind. In the cockpit, the woman sat in the co-pilot's chair, her golden eyes watching the endless void of space unfold before her. The dragon, too large for the vessel's interior, had taken flight alongside them, gliding effortlessly through the blackness, its wings cutting through the cosmic dust. "You still haven't told me your name," Dane said, glancing at her as he adjusted their heading. She turned to him, as if testing the words on her tongue. "Names are strange things. I had one long ago, but if I am to walk this new galaxy, perhaps I should choose a new one." Dane smirked. "We humans do that sometimes. Fresh start and all." She nodded, then looked back at the viewport, her expression unreadable. "The galaxy has changed much since I last saw it, but some things remain the same. The hunger for power, the fear of the unknown, the whispers of old empires still clinging to their ghosts." The dragon let out a low rumble through the calms. "And what will you do now?" She exhaled, her fingers tracing patterns in the air, golden energy swirling at her command. "I do not know yet, but I do know this. The cycle that imprisoned me, the war that buried my kind, it is not over. Merely waiting. And now I am awake." Dane leaned back in his chair, absorbing her words. He hadn't just found an ancient artifact. He had unchained a force lost to time, a force that could shape the future of the galaxy. And the galaxy would take notice. Already, his ship's long-range scanners were picking up signals, distant but growing. Someone had noticed the anomaly. They were being watched. "We're not alone out here," Dane muttered. The woman's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. "We never were." As the ship hurtled into the unknown, Dane couldn't shake the feeling that he had stepped into something far greater than himself. A story written in the ruins of dead civilizations. A battle that had never truly ended. And at its center, a human diver who had gone too deep and surfaced with something the universe was not ready to face. Far beyond, among the stars, a signal pulsed. Ancient, familiar, a response. Humanity had awakened something, and now the galaxy would have to reckon with it. The abyss had changed. Dane floated in the silent depths, no longer just a visitor in an alien sea, but something more, something woven into its very fabric. The golden glow pulsed beneath his skin, a steady rhythm that whispered secrets only he could hear. He had become a guardian, though he still didn't know what that truly meant. The dragon circled him, its movements slower, more reverent. "You have done what no other could. The abyss stirs, but it no longer hungers. The temple is whole again." Dane nodded, though the weight of what had happened settled deep in his chest. "And the treasure?" The dragon's gaze flickered toward the temple. "It is no longer for mortals to claim. It is part of you now. You carry the last knowledge of a dead civilization." Dane exhaled, the enormity of it sinking in. Humanity had spent centuries looking to the stars for answers, never once thinking to look beneath the waves of distant worlds. He had found something ancient, something powerful, and now it lived within him. But what was he supposed to do with it? The dragon swam closer, tilting its head. "You fear what you have become. I don't even know what I've become." The great beast let out a rumbling sound, something between a chuckle and a sigh. "Then you'll have to find out." Dane turned his gaze upward, toward the endless black that stretched beyond the abyss. His ship was waiting, orbiting high above. His people would have questions he wasn't sure he could answer. Could he go back? Did he even belong among them anymore? The abyss pulsed around him, warm and ancient. He could stay. He could spend a lifetime unraveling the knowledge buried in the deep, guarding what remained. Or he could take it with him. The dragon watched him carefully. "What will you do, human?" Dane clenched his fists, feeling the golden glow respond. He had always been a diver, an explorer, someone who pushed the boundaries of the unknown. And now he carried the last echoes of a lost civilization. "I'll return to the stars," he said finally, "but I won't leave this place behind." The dragon inclined its massive head. "Then go. But remember, the abyss does not forget its own." Dane nodded, kicking off into the dark, his body moving effortlessly through the water. The temple's light faded behind him, but he could still feel it, a part of him now, whispering in the depths of his mind. As he ascended, breaking through the layers of deep-sea darkness, he wondered how the universe would react to what he had become. Would humanity embrace this knowledge or fear it? Would the galactic powers see him as a threat or something else entirely? He didn't know, but he intended to find out. Far above, his ship blinked in the void, a small beacon in the endless black. Dane propelled himself upward, leaving the abyss behind, yet carrying its legacy with him. Centuries would pass. Stories would spread. Some would call him a myth, a ghost from the deep who had touched something beyond comprehension. Others would fear the knowledge he carried, whispering of the human who had dived too deep and returned changed. But one thing was certain. Among the stars, in the great expanse where empires rose and fell, one phrase would be remembered above all others. The abyss does not forget. Dane's breath came shallow as he checked his scanner. The sonar pinged something enormous moving just beyond the edge of his vision. A shadow, darker than the abyss itself, slithered through the trench. His instinct screamed at him to ascend, to flee, but the scientist in him demanded he stay. This was the greatest discovery of his career. "Dane, what's happening?" Dr. Carr's voice cracked through his helmet. There's something else here," he whispered, afraid that whatever lurked in the shadows might hear him. A ripple moved through the water, a silent wave of displacement that sent loose particles spiraling upward. Then, suddenly, the dragon stirred. Its eyes, two massive orbs that glowed with an ethereal blue light, flicked open. It locked onto Dane, and for the briefest moment, he felt something impossible, an intelligence beyond comprehension pressing against his mind. Then the shadow struck. A massive form lunged from the darkness, jaws wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. It was a predator, a nightmare of the deep, unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. The dragon reacted in an instant, uncoiling its massive body and slamming into the attacker with enough force to shake the trench walls. Dane was caught in the ensuing shockwave, his suit's systems flickering as he tumbled through the water. Warnings blared, pressure spikes, system failures, oxygen depletion. He fought to stabilize himself, but the battle unfolding before him was beyond anything he could have prepared for. The dragon roared, a deep, resonant sound that Dane felt in his bones. Its massive tail whipped around, colliding with the predator and sending it hurtling backward. The attacker, a monstrous thing with chitinous armor and luminous, slit-pupil eyes, regrouped, circling the dragon with a predatory grace. Dane knew he couldn't stay here. His suit wouldn't survive another impact. He fired his thrusters, angling toward a nearby rock outcrop, desperately trying to avoid drawing attention. But just as he reached the ledge, something glimmered beneath him. A structure, a temple, half buried in the abyssal silt, covered in carvings too precise to be natural. And at its center, something pulsed with an eerie, golden light. Treasure. His breath hitched. Had the dragon been protecting it? Was this why the predator had come? Before he could process, the dragon lunged again, jaws clamping down on the predator's neck. The water filled with an inky substance, blood. The predator thrashed, its body convulsing, and then, with a final gurgling screech, it fell limp. The dragon released its grip, exhaling a deep, guttural breath. Then, slowly, it turned its massive head toward Dane. Dane froze. The dragon stared at him, those glowing eyes unblinking. And then, in a voice that echoed through the ocean itself, it spoke. "You should not have come here, human." Dane had thought he understood the abyss. He was wrong. As he followed the dragon deeper, the water itself seemed to change. The crushing darkness gave way to something unnatural, a glow that pulsed through the currents, lighting the way with an eerie, golden shimmer. It was not light as he knew it. It was something older, something alive. His suit's sensors flickered wildly, struggling to process the strange energy signatures around him. This deep, Where pressure should have turned him into pulp, he felt weightless, as if the ocean had forgotten to crush him. It was as if he had crossed a threshold into something beyond the physical world. Ahead, the dragon moved with deliberate grace, its massive form gliding through the impossible glow. The bioluminescent veins across its scales pulsed in time with the light around them, as if it was part of the abyss itself. Then suddenly it stopped. Dane hovered in the water, his breathing shallow. The temple lay before him. It was ancient, so much older than anything he had ever seen. Towering structures of dark stone, etched with glowing symbols, rose from the seabed. The architecture was alien, yet eerily symmetrical, as if built with an understanding of mathematics that far exceeded human knowledge. Massive doors, carved with intricate patterns, stood slightly ajar, as if inviting him in. But something else was here. His helmet display flared red. Movement. Fast. Dane twisted just in time to see the shadows shift. The water around him trembled as something stirred in the darkness beyond the temple. For a moment, he thought it was another dragon, until he saw the eyes. Rows of them. They opened all at once, dozens, maybe hundreds, blinking into existence in the abyssal dark. And then the thing moved. It was vast, bigger than the dragon, bigger than the temple itself. Its body was a nightmare of tendrils and shifting mass, coiling and unraveling as it surged toward him. It did not swim. It simply advanced, as if the water itself bent to its will. Dane's mind screamed at him to run. Every instinct told him to turn back, to retreat to the safety of the surface, but something deeper held him in place. The treasure, the temple, the abyss had chosen him for a reason. The dragon let out a low, warning growl, its bioluminescence flaring brighter. You are not meant to see this, human. Dane's voice was hoarse. Then why did you bring me here? The beast did not answer. Instead, it turned to face the approaching horror, its body tensing. Because the abyss is waking, and you are part of it now. The monstrous entity loomed closer, its shifting form writhing with impossible motion. And then, in a voice that was not a voice, it spoke. You do not belong. Dane's body went rigid. The words bypassed his ears, drilling straight into his mind. It was not speech. It was something deeper, something primordial. He clenched his fists, fighting the wave of terror washing over him. I came for the treasure. The abyssal horror let out a sound, something between a laugh and a growl. The treasure? Foolish creature. The treasure is not for you. It is not for anyone. And then the temple doors groaned, shifting open further, revealing a golden light within. The horror recoiled, its tendrils snapping back as if burned. The dragon moved between Dane and the creature, wings spreading protectively. Choose, human. Leave now, or face what lies within. Dane's pulse thundered in his ears. His mind screamed at him to turn back, but his heart knew better. He had come too far. There was no turning back now. He swam forward, and the abyss swallowed him whole. The moment Dane crossed the threshold, the abyss changed. The golden light that had seemed so inviting turned blinding, wrapping around him like liquid fire. His suit's pressure alarms blared, warning him of an imminent system failure, but he pressed forward. The temple's interior was vast, an impossible space that should not exist at these depths. And at the heart of it stood the treasure. A pedestal of obsidian rose from the temple floor, and atop it sat an artifact unlike anything Dane had ever seen. It was a sphere roughly the size of a human head, made of an unknown metal that pulsed with a rhythm, like a heartbeat. But it wasn't just a machine. It was alive. He could feel it. Behind him, the dragon let out a low, reverberating growl. Do not touch it, human. You do not understand what you hold. Dane's fingers twitched. Then tell me. It is not a treasure. It is a prison. A pulse of energy rippled through the temple, sending a deep vibration through the walls. The abyssal horror outside recoiled, its many eyes narrowing. It knew. It had been guarding this place, waiting, ensuring that nothing disturbed what lay within. Dane's mind reeled. A prison? For what? The dragon stepped closer, its bioluminescent veins pulsing in time with the sphere's glow. For something far worse than me. Another tremor rocked the temple. The walls groaned under the pressure of something unseen. The artifact's pulsing grew faster, its glow intensifying as if responding to Dane's presence. A voice, ancient, deep, and filled with knowing, whispered into his mind. "Release me." Dane gasped. It was not like the abyssal horror's invasive words. This was different. It was familiar. It was human. The dragon roared. "No, it lies." But Dane's heart pounded with recognition. Whatever was inside that sphere, whoever was inside, was one of his own. He reached out. The instant his fingers brushed the artifact, the temple shuddered. A wave of golden energy burst outward, sending cracks racing along the obsidian pedestal. The abyssal horror outside screamed, its form unraveling as it tried to flee. The dragon turned its gaze toward Dane, fury and disbelief warring in its glowing eyes. "You fool! You do not know what you have done." Dane staggered backward as the sphere cracked open. A blinding light exploded outward, and in the center of it, a silhouette emerged. A figure. Human. She took a breath, her first in countless millennia, and opened her eyes. Dane barely had time to process what was happening before the temple walls began to collapse. The abyss was imploding, and they were at its center. The dragon roared. The abyssal horror howled, and Dane did the only thing he could do. He grabbed the woman's hand and ran, as the deep swallowed everything behind them. The temple was collapsing, the abyss imploding in on itself, and Dane could barely keep his grip on the woman's hand as the water churned around them. The dragon let out a roar, spreading its wings and launching itself forward. It wasn't running, it was leading. Dane's head spun with questions, but survival came first. He followed the dragon, the mysterious woman in tow, as the abyss twisted and shrank, the golden energy from the broken artifact warping reality itself. The once endless trench walls were now closing in, forcing them toward the surface. The abyssal horror was nowhere to be seen. Whether it had fled in terror or been consumed by the collapsing space, Dane didn't know. All he could focus on was the ascent. The dragon propelled itself upward, and Dane activated his emergency buoyancy system. His suit fought against the pressure, forcing him and the woman toward the light above. They breached the surface with a violent splash, emerging into a storm-churned sea. Dane gasped for air, feeling gravity return in full force. His suit struggled to adjust, but he held tight to the woman, who coughed and inhaled deeply, her first true breath in eons. The dragon surfaced beside them, its massive form causing waves to roll outward. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the face of the woman Dane had freed. Her eyes, deep, glowing gold, met his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely above the howling wind. She took another deep breath, her body trembling with the weight of existence. "I am the last of what was lost. And you, human, have broken the cycle." Dane barely had time to process her words before the dragon interjected. "You do not understand what you have unleashed." She was not meant to wake. The woman turned to the dragon, her expression unreadable. "And you are not meant to guard an empty tomb forever. The war ended long ago. The chains have rusted." The dragon let out a deep, rumbling exhale. "And yet, I fear what comes next." Dane looked between the two, realization dawning. This wasn't just some forgotten prisoner. This woman was part of something ancient, something that had shaped the galaxy long before humanity ever reached the stars. And he just changed everything. A sudden beeping in his helmet snapped him back to the present. His ship was still waiting, its automated systems picking up his distress signal. They had to move. "We need to get out of here," Dane said, motioning to the approaching storm. "I have a ship. We can figure this out later." The woman studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Yes, there is much to discuss." The dragon's gaze lingered on them both before it too relented. "Very well, but know this, human, the past does not stay buried, and neither do its consequences." With that ominous warning, The three of them, man, dragon, and ancient survivor, set their sights on the horizon, where the future waited, uncertain and full of untold truths.